Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Murphy. I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Pedagogy here at Kenyon College and in beautiful Gambira, Ohio, which we acknowledge is on the ancestral lands of the Miami, Lenape, Wyandot, and Shawnee peoples, among others. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're really excited. We have more than 90 people registered for this two-day online conference to talk about the things that we learned in the last year that we'd like to keep going forward. This morning, getting us started, we've got Alexandra Bradner, visiting assistant professor of philosophy here at Kenyon College, Sungwook Kim, assistant professor of mathematics at DePaul University, and Dr. Jennifer Garrett-Lizzie, assistant professor of education, Ohio Wesleyan University. We will turn it over to Alexandra Bradner. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you for organizing this. This has been such a time of pedagogical innovation and pedagogical exhaustion. And it's great to have a forum to present all of this work that we've been doing. And I know that I'm speaking to pedagogical experts here. So please, if you have any advice at the end or any tips, I would love to hear them. And I'm probably not going to be able to pay attention to the chat at the same time, but please do use the chat, and maybe Joe can help us, field questions at the end or during. So this is a presentation about oral exams and symbolic logic, something that I did new during COVID. And there's a special challenge for mathematicians and philosophers who teach logic that arose with COVID, which is that assessment in logic and math usually involves some kind of exam, and students learning from home can cheat either by collaborating or by using their books. There are proctoring apps, but they cost money, they involve a learning curve, they threaten privacy, they create a climate of distrust and suspicion, and this is the thing that really bothered me the most. And they also feel a little bit creepy. They just have sort of an intuitive revulsion to them. But tightly timed exams are only fair when students are in similar test-taking environments. So basically, the challenge was that I was really puzzling, how do I give exams? And logic is usually mostly exams. So during spring 2020, when we were just thrust into the on-time environment, I decided to take a lesson from the mathematicians who always have everything all worked out. The philosophers are the opposite. We never have anything all worked out. That's why we're still talking about the same questions we've been talking about for thousands of years. So I looked around at some math sites, and they recommended cheat-resistant open book exam questions that were very clever. So you can provide a question with an incorrect answer and ask the students to find the error. You can give students an answer and have the students write a question for the answer. You can offer both a question and its answer and ask students to explain why the answer is correct. And you can offer both a question and its answer and ask students to generate an incorrect answer, one that is routinely incorrect, and then explain why people often go wrong in that way. And this worked really well. I mean, I was very, it took a lot of work because I had to redo all my exams, but it made the exams more thoughtful. And I think it was very effective. So this was inspiring to me. So in fall 2020, I decided to add an oral exam, which is something that I understand is very routine at the doctoral level for mathematicians. This is a frequent form of testing in graduate school. This is never done in philosophy. So I mean, sometimes by creative philosophers in more verbal courses, but never really in logic courses. So I decided to add an oral exam because symbolic logic has a primary skill, derivations. You really want to know by the end of the class that students have mastered this central skill. And it's a good target for a special kind of pedagogical tool like an oral exam. Online learning interferes with our ability to get to know our students, especially if you're doing synchronous learning or if you've allowed them to have their cameras off sorry, that should be a reverse there. Without yeah, sorry, synchronous without cameras or asynchronous. That's actually right. And the COVID-19 pandemic has become kind of an incubator for pedagogical innovation. We have to be creative. And what's especially nice is administrators are forgiving failure. I think pedagogical innovation really requires experimentation, but there are so many incentives to not experiment. You have to be so careful because of your reviews. You want the evals to be good. And it's been kind of liberating during this period to be able to try some new things without fear. So there were some barriers. There's a lot of prep work to adding anything new to a class. And of course, during COVID-19, we're all exhausted anyway. There are some inclusiveness concerns always with any particular pedagogy that have to be accommodated. And the largest concern, the students were 100% completely and thoroughly terrified. Derivation can be an insight task, which means sometimes you get them right away, sometimes you don't. And that can be kind of unpredictable. I mean, practice helps, but there are just some times where you are not seeing a way forward, and having that experience in front of a faculty member is terrifying. So the puzzle was for me, how can I design a meaningful, learner-centered oral exam, an exam that will demonstrate to me whether or not my students can do derivations without adding too much stress to their already difficult semester. I mean, I felt really nervous about doing this because everyone was just exhausted and stressed out all semester. I didn't want to make it worse. So there are a couple things I did. I gave them early warning. I presented the oral exam on the first day of class. It was worth 10% of the final course grade, which is equivalent to one of our 4 chapter tests. And I shared the rubric 3 to 4 weeks before the exam. This was my rubric. I'm not going to go through it, but basically the different grades were determined by how much they could do without my assistance. The exam was supposed to be 30 minutes long with 2 derivations, one from an earlier chapter as an easy first one, and one difficult one from a later chapter. Made sure that we had a tech check. I gave students plenty of opportunities during the synchronous class. We met synchronously on Tuesdays and asynchronous work on Thursdays, hour and a half each. And Kenyon bought every Logic student an XPen Star G640 graphic tablet. You cannot see what you're writing on this tablet. That's why it's so cheap. But you can get used to it. And it was really terrific, actually. I was so thankful that Kenyon did that. And this is kind of how it works. You set it up and you get used to writing on the tablet and seeing what you're writing on the screen. For shared whiteboards, we used Whiteboard Fox, which is my favorite. It's really fast. The Zoom whiteboard is nice because it's embedded within Zoom and it records. Well, I guess you can record for Whiteboard too. And we use Google Docs sometimes because you have those printed symbols and it's just easy to see. Scaffolding was really the most important part of this exam. I built up to the oral exam in stages. I started by posting problems before class and then asking for in-class volunteers to work the problems in class, but they could prep them beforehand and then volunteer. Then I had pre-assigned problems that I would post before class, but then I would assign them to surprise teams in class, and they would have to work together in breakout rooms to do the derivation. Sometimes we made this a race, made it a little bit more fun, and then other times we didn't, because I don't really think that speed is an interesting skill in logic. Then we went to surprise problems for teams in class. I did not give them the problems ahead of time and then asked teams to volunteer when they got it. Then I did surprise problems in class for individuals, but asked for volunteers. And then finally, I did surprise problems in class and then called on individual students that didn't know they were going to be called on. That was kind of a scary last stage, but it was right before the oral exam. To make this a little bit less scary, you can allow phone a friend for surprise in-class problems. And I actually did that all the way through number 5, stage 5. And you can also, I did not do this, but you could add a team exam before individual oral exams. And again, math people are the innovators. I have a high schooler, 16, and she has team exams before every one of her math exams. And I can't tell you how much that has alleviated her stress. And I think it's actually really important, an important thing to do, especially for women in math and logic. So team exams, a great new thing that mathematicians are doing that logicians should do as well. I also really tried to make this whole process humane. There is no time limit in the oral exam. It was completely open book. And this I was doing all spring semester anyway, again, because if you don't let them use their books, then there's this cheating issue. So I just decided that everything would be open book, but that I would ask questions that would require thinking and not memorization. I offered assistance on demand, but if you were able to read any of the rubric, your grade dips for how much assistance you need. So they can always ask for a little hint from me, but the more hints I give, the lower the grade went. And then I gave an extended introduction for every oral exam, really emphasizing the casual nature of it when I was actually giving the oral exams and we were one-on-one in Zoom. So we did a tech check at the beginning. I reiterated the guidelines. I reminded them about common errors in logic. So I gave them a little bit of a lesson at the beginning of the oral exam just to get them ready. And I did give them instant feedback. I gave them their grade for the exam at the end of the exam so that they didn't have to stress about it afterwards or feel weird about it. And I made sure at the end to say, oh, you did a great job. I'm sure that's really stressful. Trying to parrot back to them what they might have been feeling during the exam. I think that always makes a student more comfortable. So this I'm not going to read, but this was on the rubric that I gave them 3 to 4 weeks before the exam. This is just a little paragraph that emphasizes what the culture of the exam was going to be, what the tone of it was going to be. And I said it would be like them working on a homework assignment with me watching, again, to sort of temper the terror. So what worked about this? I was astounded at how much goodwill this created. That was the biggest surprise. I mean, it really took my relationship with each individual student to another level. And, I should have done it earlier in the semester for that reason. I mean, I really got to know them individually. We had a little rapport. It was fun. And if I had done it a little bit earlier, I did it during finals week. If I had done it earlier, it would have really contributed to the class vibe. And especially when we're so distant from our students and we're all watching here from liberal arts colleges, we're missing that interaction. This was really a terrific way to get some of that interaction back. Not only could I determine whether or not they could do the derivations, which was really my goal. I wanted to give one exam where I could just know that they weren't cheating and that they could do this major skill. So that was, that box was checked. But I was also able to see exactly where each student was struggling and offer personalized assistance. So I could help them with the things that they in particular were having trouble with. And you can never do that in logic when you're just reading homework assignments. It's hard to see where they're going wrong. In other words, I could see how they were thinking. How were they thinking about the next line of the proof? And I could also see the learning. So it was gratifying for me. I could see them learning in this exam. So it wasn't just a summative thing. It was a developmental thing where I could see them, a formative thing. I could see them learning. That was very gratifying. And the students really were terrified. They studied their butts off for this. I mean, they were asking me for sample problems before the day. And I know they worked really hard for this exam. And that also will contribute to their cognitive retention and their takeaway learning. What didn't work? Either my rubric was too easy or I was too permissive or I didn't give harsh enough penalties, but the grades in the end were probably too high. I mean, this is a debate in pedagogy. I like the idea of mastery learning, and when you're doing mastery learning, you do end up with higher grades. So that in some ways that just doesn't bother me at all. But in other ways I was thinking, okay, well, maybe that means it wasn't challenging enough and I should have challenged them. Or maybe it was actually really challenging and they were just so scared that they rose to the challenge. So I'd be interesting to hear from all of you, what you think about this. But most people ended up with A's or B pluses. The exam took 26 hours to conduct during finals week. It was so crazy. But there was no post-exam grading, which was nice. But the problem with the no time limit is that some students took a really long time. They took an hour and a half to complete when it was supposed to be 30 minutes. So this term, I might consider a final time limit, or maybe even a time limit on pauses where if they're taking too long without me, that I step in and help. But again, I'd love your advice on that. The best students were irritated that there was no A+. And I mean, I really almost never have A+. And good students always argue that that's totally unfair because they only have 2 grade buckets instead of 3 grade buckets in the A range. I don't know what to think about that, but and then I should have used an automated scheduling system. Joe really did give me some good suggestions, but then in the end I was like, oh my gosh, that's just one more learning curve. And but the scheduling was very difficult, and it would have helped me a lot to just do Google Calendar, which would automatically alert them. Also, you know, some students don't show up, and then you have to decide, are you going to fail them or are you going to reschedule? I always decided to reschedule, and that took a lot of time. So in the end, there's a lot of instructor time involved here. And again, this assessment might work better earlier in the semester where the class could reap the rewards of the better vibe from the personal interaction. So here are some online references that I read before the exam, and I'm happy to send you these slides, or actually they'll be in the video. There were some just articles. This is just from Googling around, not really a scholarly lit review, but proctoring app references on oral exams in non-logic areas of philosophy. References on oral examinations in mathematics really were the most sophisticated references, and then references on oral exams in general. But there really weren't any references on oral exams in logic. So I was really glad I tried it, and I think I'm going to write it up for my discipline. So thank you very much.